Hi everyone, it's Professor Ashley Gordon here. Today we're going to be learning about sketching to scale. I'm going to be walking you through the process of taking a bubble diagram through several iterations that end up in a final floor plan. You've probably seen an architectural drawing that looks something like the drawing on the screen. You might have seen lots of annotation on these drawings, such as text and dimensions, and these drawings usually have a lot of detail. Before you can start to create a more refined architectural drawing that looks something like this, you want to start with the big idea and a bubble diagram. The first step in this process is to start with your idea. For this example, I'm going to be sketching out an office space. So for my office space, my big idea is that I have a larger space in the middle and then some smaller spaces that gather around that space. All you're going to do for your big idea is start to sketch that out in a quick circular sketch. This could be the framework for your bubble diagram. Once you have that big idea, you can then move on to an actual refined bubble diagram. You can see I have my main office space here. This is larger, and then I have smaller program spaces that surround it, such as the kitchen, a resource room, a more central entryway, 2 conference rooms, and a smaller breakout space. The program spaces are just the different spaces that make up the building. When you're creating a bubble diagram, you want to make sure that you include labels for each space, as well as color code each individual space. That way it's really clear what spaces are different and how they're overlapping. You want to start to think about how big spaces are, so the size of them, as well as what they need to be next to. In my example, I want the 2 conference rooms next to each other, and I want the entry more central next to the waiting room. This is where you start to place these bubbles next to each other accordingly. Once you've decided on how you want to lay out your spaces in the bubble diagram, you can move on to a more refined version of this called the block diagram. In my block diagram, I'm going to take those circular spaces and start to translate them into the shape and size of the rooms that I want. This is still preliminary, so you don't need to be measuring anything out at this point. Once you've mapped out your rooms, feel free to adjust spaces as needed. Maybe you realize your office space would work better if it was 2 wings instead of 1 really large space. Feel free to make any of those changes. Once you're ready to move on, you can now start to rough out walls and interior spaces. This will help you refine your floor plan even more. As you begin to rough out walls, you'll want to consider thickness of walls, areas for door and window openings, and any furniture that might need to be in these spaces. Depending on all of those factors, your floor plan and shapes of spaces and sizes might need to shift a little bit, and that's okay. You're going to be going through multiple iterations of your floor plan at this point. I recommend using trace paper to do this part. That way, you can put that trace paper right over your previous iteration and continue to see underneath it as you're sketching. Once you've confirmed the general size, shape, and location of your spaces, you're ready to start adding more detail and sketch this out to scale. Here's where we get to the more refined floor plan. At this point, you're ready to turn those circles and square shapes into actual walls, doors, and windows. I'm going to be sketching this at 1/4 inch equals 1 foot scale. That means that a 1/4 inch on my paper equals 1 foot in real life. Make sure you have your architectural scale handy when you're doing this part. Make sure you're also using a straight edge, a scale, or a triangle to keep your angles 90 degrees and keep all of your walls nice and straight and neat. Once you've started drafting out your walls, don't forget to add in your doors, your windows, and labels for each of your spaces. If necessary, you can add additional detail to your floor plan, such as kitchen or bathroom elements or any furniture that's necessary to show. Once you get to this point, you can then refer to your architectural scale to add some dimensions so that we can start to understand how large this office space actually is. When you get to this point, you now have a completed hand-drawn floor plan. If you want to, you can then take this into digital drafting software such as AutoCAD or Revit to create your floor plan digitally on the computer. For this first part of our module, just try creating the floor plan by hand. Walk through each step of this process, taking it from your big idea to your bubble diagram, then to your block diagram, then to your more refined floor plan. Give it a try and see how this process works for you to start creating a more refined and finalized floor plan.